Hey guys, welcome back to Laurence McKenna on LFC channel, where today we're asking the question, are Liverpool in crisis? It's a good question because from the outside, if you're not a supporter, if you're not someone who's taking and paying close attention, you would say that there are a lot of things which would say, hey, crisis, this is awful. There's angry callers into shows. If you're online, it's certainly a weird time to be a Liverpool fan. And around that, there are also just plenty of other people having a conversation, maybe even with a bit of schadenfreude, looking for Liverpool to be a bad team, looking for things that can go wrong. And I'm not the kind of guy who wants to deny the bad aspects. I could go through every one of those minor details that I think at the moment are undermining Liverpool's future. And, you know, we can put a very fine detail on the centre-backs, the left-back, whether we're transitioning the goalkeeper, the transition of the midfield shape, all of the front line, Mo Salah's situation, Virgil van Dijk's situation, very different situations, but still situations, where players think they sit in terms of Liverpool's hierarchy, how often they'll be available for Liverpool, injury, all sorts of things that maybe last season seemed to be going in our way because, you know, Arsenal had their injury crisis last year. City had their transitional year. Liverpool didn't really have a huge amount of that bad luck, so to speak. But all of that is to say, no, I don't believe Jamie O'Hara when I hear him on TalkSport saying that Liverpool are in crisis. And no, I don't listen to Dean Saunders or anyone else who is sitting there saying this is a crisis because Liverpool lost something in the Carabou Cup. And yes, it is a bad run of fixtures. And yes, I think that there are some markers for poor tactical insight, or there are some markers for poor tactical moments or people not being prepared or any of those things. But I also think that there are very reasonable explanations for all of those. And I think the reason I can rationalize some of this or begin to understand it or begin to unpack it without saying the word crisis is I think some of these are markers for a crisis. I think these are the kind of things that should things go south, and I think the only thing that I'm really thinking going south here is the players' attitude towards Arne Slot and thinking that his approach isn't the one that they need, then yeah, there are a lot of dominoes that could fall very quickly. But I think, honestly, that's the case at many top clubs. And I think that very often clubs panic, or they could have sort of irrationally press a button before they actually need to. And I don't want Liverpool to be that club. I also think that Liverpool aren't that kind of club. And I can tell you one reason why. It's nothing to do with morality or anything else. They are heavily stats influenced. They are heavily underlying numbers influenced. And Liverpool at the moment will be looking at a lot of those underlying numbers. They'll be looking at the flow of the game. They'll be looking at the reports they get back from all these different departments and saying, what is the general direction? Were we unlucky? Did we give away too? Obviously, we know they gave away too many opportunities and those kind of things, but they're not going to be looking at, they will be looking at outcomes like goals and those kind of things, but they're not going to be looking at goals and going, are we perpetually never going to score a goal? They're going to be saying, are we ahead of the curve? Are we behind the curve? Have we been outthought? How have we been outplayed? And frankly, none of those things are going to be indicated on an app because they have much deeper underlying data which we just don't have access to, because guess what? You can sell that data for millions of pounds. And when you make it commercially available, not only are you then undermining a business model, you'd have to charge people for it when the clubs will actually pay for it because it's a useful tool for them, but also you're giving people a big tool to undermine their club, to undermine an opposition club, to undermine all these kind of things. And yes, there are people out there who are data miners. Yes, there are people out there who are very data influenced. And there are people out there with very keen eyes. And I appreciate all those things. And I think some of them are making great points about Liverpool. But if they're making them, then you better believe that Liverpool are also aware of these issues. And you better believe that Arne Slot is eternally aware of what is going on at the club. And I think the biggest thing for me is not necessarily one tactical choice. I think, you know, tactical choices certainly can undermine a manager, and players can certainly say, hey, you know, we don't have confidence in this guy anymore because we feel that he's not made the right tactical choices, or, you know, there are too many players in the team that don't feel that he's going to be playing a winning game. But mostly it's about mentality. And mentality has been something that Liverpool haven't easily come across over the last few years, because I certainly think that under Jurgen Klopp, there was like this back and forth, up and down. Even the season after when we won the title under him, we kind of had a bit of a fall off a cliff. But at the same time, I also think that he created something which has the potential to create title winners and the potential to create a dynasty or a dynasty, whatever you want to call it. And within that, I think there are still some of those markers within Liverpool. You can still see, obviously, that there are some very high-end players. There are clearly some elite guys there at Liverpool Football Club who want to do the best for the club. Some of them are new, some of them are old. The new guys, Florian Wirtz, clearly is just in his own head. He's clearly just struggling with adapting mentally to a league where he probably had a bit more of the run of the play before. You could see that against Frankfurt. He felt so comfortable against Frankfurt. And suddenly we're looking at a player who does get moved off the ball easily in the Premier League, does get tackled from different angles, is coming up against different challenges. But I don't think he's unable to address those. I think he just needs the space, the time, the coaching, and the orientation around him in order to find that space. He might not be a permanent central 10 for Liverpool. He might be floating off the left. He might be in that right half space. He might be that adaptable guy, and that's possibly why he came to the club. It's possibly why he was sold on the overall project, is because of the adaptability and the super team that Liverpool want to build, not only in personnel, but also in terms of tactical approach and the way that they will empower these players. But that's taken time at a lot of big clubs. I don't know if you remember, and obviously it wasn't nearly as bad, I don't think, at PSG, but there was questions over Luis Enrique at the start of the season, which then became a very convincing season for a lot of their players where they won, first of all, the league, but also, more importantly, the Champions League. They beat Liverpool on the way there, one of the best teams in Europe. They beat Arsenal on the way there, one of the best teams in Europe. They outthought them, they outran them, they outmoded them. And the previous ideas that Arsenal and Liverpool were operating on were outdone by these new ideas that PSG were coming up with. But there was a time where there were heavy questions around this PSG team and whether they were clicking, whether things were coming together, whether it did look like it ever would. And that team came around for Luis Enrique. Luis Enrique, of course, a great man manager and a great individual in the game, someone who's done a lot of things not only on the field, but off the field as well. And obviously I respect him for everything that he's been through. Not that he needs that from me, but you get my point. And I think that team really rallied. And I don't think that is out of the bounds of possibility for Liverpool. When I see players not playing for Slot, that's when I'll begin to worry. When I see players openly undermining him, when I see real issues, then I'll have a problem with what's going on at Liverpool. And even then, I would still say, well, is that really on Slot, or is that on some of these more senior players who aren't being leaders right now, trying to be leaders, but not necessarily leading in the way that we need? Do you think Mo Salah removing things from his social media is helpful in this time? Do you think that's a club guy? Or do you think that's someone who looks like he might want to go to Saudi? Do you think that is someone who looks like he might know that he's already exiting Liverpool, not only because Saudi could take him, but also because, guess what? Liverpool are trying to move the system away from him. It's not that he's a bad player. It's not that he is someone who doesn't deserve to be a Liverpool legend. It's not that someone who is not worthy of respect. But people who are worthy of respect are not eternally worthy of respect. That doesn't mean he's not worthy of it. But what I mean is, it doesn't mean that you always play him. It doesn't mean he's always on the starting 11. It doesn't mean he's always getting the position that he wants. Sometimes he might have to adapt around other people. Maybe he was expected to hold the hand of some of these new people who came in, or be a supportive figure, or whatever you want to call it. And I think that is important when you're addressing this. I think it's really important when you're looking at this. Liverpool are in transition shape-wise. And I think we thought that people like Mo Salah would be able to cope in this kind of scenario, in this kind of situation. I think we thought that people like Alexander Isak could possibly hit the ground running a little earlier. And maybe the fact that Newcastle did drag the transfer out because they weren't capable of operating efficiently in the transfer market should have been something that Richard Hughes and Arne Slot anticipated. And maybe we should have looked at teams and players being exhausted from the previous season. People who were drivers for us, Alexis McAllister, someone who a lot of people thought was fantastic last year, and I agreed with them, but you could see he was beginning to become exhausted because his profile was an excellent one, but wasn't necessarily one that was fitted exactly to Arne Slot's system, and so he had to exert himself that little bit more. Dominic Szoboszlai has stepped up for Liverpool this year, but he's absolutely running himself into the ground if he plays like that for a whole season. It's not sustainable for Liverpool, and Liverpool are looking for a sustainable model. Not one game where we win, not one big event, because we will not win leagues or Champions Leagues or whatever else on one big event. We will win it over consistency and time. And they will sacrifice that consistency in the short term for the long-term belief that they will become consistent. Now, there is one final thing that I think would undermine Slot's position at Liverpool, and it is this kind of eternal conversation of where football is going. And I don't think that we're nearly as equipped as Liverpool and Richard Hughes, Michael Edwards and Arne Slot, guys who identified that Arne Slot was the guy to come in at Liverpool and not only do well for one season, but do well for 5-6 seasons. They've recently wanted to sign him to another contract. They're looking at signing more players, so clearly they have confidence in those players. Szoboszlai, those kind of guys. And it's clear to me that Liverpool at that time identified Arne Slot as an adaptable manager and would have spoken about where Liverpool were going, not just one season. Hey, can you take this very well put together team? But they will have said, do you think we can adapt this shape? Do you think the principles can work in a 3-5-2, a 3-4-3, a 4-3-3, a 4-5-1, whatever shape you want to name? Do you think your principles can work there? And they'll have run those numbers, analytics-wise, but also model-wise, and they'll have said, yeah, we think this can work. But if football then changes, or it goes in another direction, or people find solves quicker than they thought that they would have the other way, because this is kind of warfare of tactics, right? Does that keep Arne Slot relevant in this era? And if he's unable to coach, because we have seen a lot of backroom changes in recent months, people moving positions, Heiting are leaving, all these kind of things. If he's unable to get these messages over to the players, even though he is a great manager, then he's not an effective manager. And it's about being effective as well as being great. And if people are looking at, who else could we bring in if it isn't Arne Slot, and some of those other managers are moving position, or Liverpool would want to move for Iraola, someone who clearly would have been a Richard Hughes kind of guy, or, they want to move for someone else in Europe, they'll look at how those people are available. Because you won't get those people if they sign to Chelsea or whatever, and there will be a ticking, clock on that one. And I'm not saying I think Liverpool will, directly go out there and try and get Iraola to replace Slot. Maybe there is an intuition in there that I think Liverpool might, they'll be looking at their options. But it doesn't mean that they don't want Slot. It doesn't mean that they don't want it to work. It means we need to rally around this guy right now. And if we like him, which I think broadly we do, we need to react to the media and the press and not let them use us as phone clips where it's like, oh, I heard something. First of all, one phone clip. My granddad went to the game and he was upset. Your granddad went, frankly, as old as he is, your granddad went to a Carabou Cup game. What did he expect to see? Did he expect to see half and half starting 11? What was the football he expected? Because we saw the Southampton game. We know the Carabou Cup teams that Liverpool, not only under Slot, but under so many managers have fielded. We know they're not fielding a starting 11. And you can't say that there weren't signs early on that this team still wanted to try, this team still felt good about themselves, all these kind of things. It's just rubbish. And yeah, we can apologise. Yeah, we can throw ourselves on a sword. Yeah, we can be dramatic or whatever you want to call it. But it is pure rubbish to say that people went to this game and thought that this follows the same trend, team and starting 11-wise, as the Premier League or the Champions League. It's just rubbish. And people saying he didn't feel a strong enough starting 11. Yeah, have you seen the games we've got coming up? Have you seen what he has to prioritise in this period? Have you seen that we have key injuries to key players in this time and that some of those guys are underperforming? Now, the faces of the players that sat on the sideline, I didn't feel particularly convinced by, but that's just me reading into things rather than solid information that we have from anywhere. Yeah, the players look miserable. How do you want them to look in a time when they're losing however many games in a row, 6 and 7, they've not won, they're not playing particularly well, they're clearly not performing well enough for the manager, and they're not performing well enough for Liverpool. Yeah, they should look ashamed of themselves. Yeah, they should look angry about it. Yeah, they should look like they are feeling sorry for themselves. Or whatever you want to say, maybe not feeling sorry for yourself. They shouldn't look like they're feeling great about life. And it also requires the senior players to invest here. And I think that's one of the reasons that Jurgen Klopp left, was he realised he couldn't get that same level of investment from some of those players, and he wouldn't be able to do another season motivating them in the way that he did, but also he would lose the connection with the players if he wasn't able to motivate them in the way that he did before. So people talking about Arne Slot leaving and Jurgen Klopp returning, they're talking absolute rubbish. You're literally talking rubbish. Slot, different manager to Klopp, completely different system that he operates in, and I think Klopp would want more power, and he certainly wouldn't be able to operate. I mean, he's very capable, but Michael Edwards left in a previous era because Jurgen Klopp was the manager, broadly, not that they fell out or anything, but just broadly because that wasn't the system that Liverpool needed to work through. And I get it, change is a very hard thing, but it doesn't mean that we should just be sitting around and going, well, let's revert to the type that we had before, because that worked then. It won't work in football now to play that same style of football. Mikel Arteta knew that, and that's why they went through pain last season and the season before that to get to this point. Pep Guardiola is searching for something in the Premier League right now, and because Liverpool are the team that gets a lot of clicks, they're going under the radar as to how poor things have been for Man City this season and why no one is holding them to account. I don't particularly know, but that's irrelevant, right? It's irrelevant talking about Man City, but it's a good example of a manager that is searching for something. So While we're all busy throwing Slot under the bus and saying it should be X, Y, Z, I think these are all very surface things. And if you can identify a tactical deficiency, Slot sure as hell would have been able to do the same. Does it mean he can fix it? Well, some people are saying he's not able to, and until I personally see a manager or a team give up, I don't particularly invest in those ideas. I think confidence is a huge part of this. I think belief and mentality is a huge part of this. And you can see that in multiple different teams. Yeah, there'll be people who'll dunk on us or have their little wins. I saw Eddie Howe's comment last night about Voltemade. It's a real tribute to him that we're not talking about the previous guy. And everyone's trying to kind of get on Alexander Isak's back right now and get on different players. And that's part of competition, right? That's what we expect from the opposition. But I certainly don't expect the reaction to be, we'll get rid. I don't expect people to undermine a manager or a player or whoever in such a way that we really just turn on them. First of all, it's not how I feel about the players, but it's also not how I feel about Liverpool and my experience of the club. And some people in the comments will call me eternally positive, or I don't think anyone really called me delusional. I don't think we're quite in that phase yet. But I think broadly, Liverpool have the infrastructure, the players, and the know-how and the knowledge to turn this around. And not that I think it needs to be turned around in inverted commas. We're still very early on in a season. So, yeah, I'd love to know what you guys think in the comments below. There's a Discord down there if you want to get in there and chat about it. There is also a Patreon if you want to support the work we do. And of course, there is membership on this channel. Patreon is kind of my preference. We get a little bit of a better cut over there. But, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I'm sure that you will have your own opinions. I'm sure that you'll be seeing things that maybe I'm not, or you'll be seeing things differently to the way that I'm seeing things. So I'd love to know what you guys think. Let me know. And of course, I'll be back tomorrow with more coverage of Liverpool, preview of the weekend, big game against Aston Villa, followed by a big game against Real Madrid. So lots of big games to come. And I think the team will obviously be very changed by the weekend. Let me know what you think we will field on the weekend. How did you feel about that starting 11? I think it's the Carabou Cup and we have to field those kind of starting 11s. But I'd be interested in what your overall thoughts are, where your heart is, where your head is at, and where you think, what your intuition is telling you this ends up as. At the moment, for me, I'm finding it hard to map out whether it does end up as like an Arne Slot sacking, which wouldn't really make much sense to me, or Liverpool turn it around. It's an interesting one. I'd really love to know where everyone's head's at. I think the Slot outers are a little bit premature, and I think it's easy to be a doom monger or a doomsayer, because if it goes right, you go, well, it didn't look that way. And if it goes wrong, you go, told you. I think it's also very easy to be one of those doom mongers or those kind of people if you don't have investment in the club and you don't really care what goes on the field. You do it for banter, or you're sitting there playing a little violin while a Liverpool fan is calling in, and allegedly you're the voice of the fans. So let me know what you think in the comments below. I will be there tomorrow. I'll be there the day after, and I'll be there on the weekend to chat to you about all these games. Real Madrid coming quick, as is Man City. So get in the comments below and let me know what you guys are thinking. What starting 11 will we play this weekend? And would it be similar or different to the Real Madrid starting 11? Let me know in the comments below and I'll chat to you guys tomorrow. Much love.